It's been a little while, so it's time to revisit Nick Spencer on Amazing Spider-Man. Is it still so amazing, or is there something left to be desired? What's up, everybody? I'm Stan, and welcome to Detail Comics, where we go over comics in detail. This is I Rate Reviews, the show where I go over a comic book, its story, its art, give you my impressions, and let you know whether it's something you need to go back to the comic book shop for or not. Make sure you subscribe to get more of these every single week. The book that I want to talk about right now is Amazing Spider-Man number 14, which sees guest artist Chris Bachalo come in and lend his specific style to this storyline. And I am a fan of Chris Bachalo, so I'm easily a little bit biased, and I've really been enjoying Amazing Spider-Man. So this is something that I'm going to be looking for setup and what is going to be coming in the future, because there's a number of different threads that are left out here that you just got to pull on and weave your way into the web of Spider-Man. But let's take a look at the comic book and see what we might have in store for us. With the last video I've made on Amazing Spider-Man being almost 6 months ago, it's hard to kind of hop into issue number 14 and really have anything solid to say without giving a lot of backstory, but I'm going to try my best. The introduction of Chris Bachalo as the artist for this particular issue of the series I think is a really welcome addition, and his introduction to Arcade and Kraven is a really solid one. Nick Spencer is a relatively wordy writer in a lot of cases. He likes to monologue, he likes to give background, he likes to give inner thoughts to his different characters, and this is no exception. As we see Peter Parker kind of dive into the sewer system after the initial interaction of Arcade and Kraven, which is setting up the Hunted storyline that's going to debut in February or March or whenever that's going to happen, we get closer to Dr. Connors, who has worked hard to bring Peter back into the fray at his university, as well as kind of get him back on the path of science and academia, which is a really good thing for Peter, so that way there's no sense of false achievements. But the real striking portion of this is how Chris Bachalo really relays these characters visually, and though the Lizard is probably a bit more iguana-esque than what he normally would be, I find that it's a really striking and powerful style, and then the enhancements to his family that he's made in order to keep them alive after the clone conspiracy, which is of course the Lizard serum, and that has caused some unfortunate side effects that have kept them underground inside the sewers of New York. And the family troubles that they have are phenomenally relatable. You know, a kid that is trying to rebel, and he has no real concept of what kind of consequences that are going to be befalling him if he goes out into the outside world, or how he's going to be misconstrued, even though in the Marvel Universe there are dozens, hundreds, thousands of unique individuals like himself between Inhumans and mutants and various other powered individuals. But the legacy of the Lizard being a villain, you know, only recently getting accepted back into society, is a really hard stigma for them to overcome. And Dr. Connors just wants his son and his family to understand that. However, the most interesting part of this book doesn't necessarily come with the Connors family. It comes with May Parker. As we get the backstory, we get Peter's monologue about that, and then all of a sudden we get May's interaction with the family lawyer, which is telling her that, well, she's about to go broke. A lot of the investments that were made in Parker Industries are now gone. She doesn't have the money. She's got to look for a smaller apartment. But by the end of it, he starts hitting on her. The floaty love bubbles are just such a great touch from Bachalo. When she just starts trashing his wine, throwing it all over him, the expressions on the individual characters are fantastic. You see this kind of smitten, solemn look on the lawyer's face, but then you see May's stern brow just completely devastating him before throwing the wine glass on him. I just really love the style and how he portrays those emotions so excellently inside this. And then the subtle kind of, haha, wait till you guys see what I've got, as she pulls out this holographic projector from her pocket before turning into this gigantic furry spider creature that just scares everybody off. And then of course, in true May Parker fashion, she finds this homeless man, brings him inside to the restaurant, and tries to have the same meal that she was having before, because she is that kind of individual. She is a stone, she is the rock that Peter was built upon. You can see the admirable qualities. Is she a bit past her prime as far as a character? Maybe in some people's eyes, but when she's written well, it's always a welcome addition. Of course, you've got Peter and MJ making their way back from the Connors residence. You've got Taskmaster and Black Ant making their way in, trying to capture the Rhino as he rambles through this restaurant. Unfortunately, Spider-Man's on the scene, and in a rare villain-hero team-up, because he was supposed to go straight, they take on Taskmaster, who has been watching some of Spider-Man's game tape, trying to learn a few things. But Black Ant's just trying to take on the Rhino, and it's not going very well. However, as we kind of conclude this, Black Ant, being the resourceful individual that he is, pulls out a huge gun and just starts blasting, which is devastating the restaurant area that Spider-Man and Rhino were fighting outside of, leaving us in a kind of cliffhanger moment. We do not necessarily know what happened with Aunt May, but I have this sneaking suspicion that the homeless man is going to do something that can save her, and may or may not be influential in the story moving forward. So when it comes to Amazing Spider-Man, I am a really big fan of what Nick Spencer has done with the character. Some people will say that it feels like an apology tour, like we're saying sorry for what we've done to Spider-Man over the last 5, 7, 8 years. They think that Dan Slott was the worst thing that happened to comic books, and this is going to be some sort of resurrection of the character. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that there are some admirable things that Dan Slott has done, but his writing is not necessarily for everybody, just like Nick Spencer's writing is not necessarily for everybody. There's a lot of different things that go into being a creator and then taking on these characters that have such a huge legacy and then trying to take them to new places. And what I think Nick Spencer's doing is adding more depth to situations that are already in place, adding more development to these characters, looking back on a classic version of Spider-Man, taking those kind of constructs and moving them into a situation where a lot of slots and any more recent developments are filled with more depth. And anytime that you can add depth to one of my favorite characters, I'm always going to be on board. The addition of Bachalo for this particular issue was fantastic, even though I do really like the work of Otley and Humberto Ramos. But even though he might not be there for a long term, I'll take it as a good one. But I want to know what you guys think about Amazing Spider-Man number 14. Is Nick Spencer doing exactly what you were hoping, or is it something a little bit too much for you? So hit me up in the comments down below and we can start that conversation. As always, if you like what you see, hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to get more news, reviews, and commentary on comic books, comic book movies, comic book TV shows and games, and anything and everything inside the world of comics.